I was hand-washing clothes in the sink when my mother-in-law burst in and yelled, "Stop making a mess in my house." I wasn't allowed to use the machine. "You're not family enough." My husband just whispered, "Don't upset her." But when she needed my help after her fall, I just turned and walked. I never thought I'd end up living in my mother-in-law's house. But after the wedding, things didn't go the way we planned. My husband, Mark, lost his job at the shipping company 2 months before our lease was up, and I was only pulling part-time hours as a nurse's aide. We were drowning in bills. His mom, Diane, offered us the extra room in her house in Jacksonville. She made it sound like a lifeline. Said we could stay until we got on our feet. That was 5 years ago. I'm still not sure if the offer was ever genuine, or if she just wanted a live-in maid she didn't have to pay. At first, I tried to make it work. I cooked, cleaned, did all the laundry, and took care of the yard when Mark couldn't. Diane nitpicked everything. If I cooked rice, it was too sticky. If I cleaned the counters, I was wasting her good spray. And if I sat down to rest, she made comments like, "Must be nice to be on vacation all day." She never said it out loud, but I knew she thought I trapped her son. I heard her once on the phone whispering, "Well, I guess he went through with it. Guess she's not going anywhere now." That burned. But I let it slide. I always let things slide. The worst was the washing machine. She told me early on, "Don't touch it. I have a system." I thought she meant she wanted to do the laundry herself. But no, she just didn't want me using it. I found out later she'd let Mark use it anytime. Even her church friend used it once when she came by. But not me. So I started hand-washing my things. Scrubs, underwear, socks, anything personal. I'd fill the sink in the back utility room and scrub until my fingers wrinkled. Sometimes it took me an hour just to wash and rinse one load. One morning, I was elbow-deep in suds, my back aching, when Diane walked in without knocking. She took one look at the sink and lost it. "Stop making a mess in my house," I said calmly. "It's just the sink. I'm not touching the machine." She stepped closer, like she wanted to tower over me. "That's not the point. You're not family enough to be doing things like this here." I felt the breath go out of me. I didn't say anything. Mark walked in a minute later. He looked between us, confused. I whispered, "She just told me I'm not family enough." He barely looked at me. Just said, "Don't upset her, okay?" That was the moment I stopped defending him. Over the next year, things got worse. Diane would leave notes around the house. "Put things back where they belong," or "Not your home. Respect my rules." I started sleeping in a hoodie just so I didn't have to walk down the hall in a tank top. I changed in the bathroom. I avoided the kitchen when she was home. Mark said I was being sensitive. That's just how she is. No. That's how you let her be. When she tripped and fell that day, it was early spring. The pollen was thick and she'd been coughing for days. I was cleaning up the kitchen after a night shift, half dead on my feet. I heard her going down the back steps with a full laundry basket. Then I heard the scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was sharp, raw, panicked. I rushed to the window. She was sprawled on the concrete, twisted wrong. Her ankle looked shattered. She was crying and yelling, "Help me." We locked eyes. I saw her pain. I also saw every sneer, every insult, every time she made me feel like dirt. I stood there, frozen. Then I turned and walked back to the counter. I picked up the sponge and went back to wiping the stovetop like I hadn't heard a thing. Mark found her 20 minutes later. She dragged herself halfway up the steps. He asked why I didn't help. I said, "She doesn't want me touching her things." After Diane's fall, something in the house shifted. Mark didn't say much the night it happened. He helped her into the car and drove her to the ER. When he got back, I was sitting at the kitchen table. "She broke her ankle," he said, "and tore a ligament." I just nodded. He didn't ask why I didn't help. Not that night. But the next day, it started. He came home from work and said, "You could have done something. She's in pain." I didn't flinch. "She's been putting me through pain for 5 years. "She's old," he said. "She doesn't mean it." "Yeah, I said. But she says it. Over and over. From that moment, the silence between us got louder. He started sleeping in the living room, saying Diane needed peace and quiet while she recovered. But he didn't come back to our room even after she was stable. Then Diane started playing victim harder than ever. She told neighbors I stood over her while she begged for help. Said I smirked and turned away. That part wasn't true. I didn't smile. But I didn't help, either. She told a story at church, too. Suddenly her friends were dropping by with casseroles and sympathy cards. One of them actually had the nerve to say to me, "You'll understand when you have a mother-in-law of your own someday." I laughed in her face. But what cut the deepest was Mark. He started blaming me for things that had nothing to do with Diane. Why are the bills late? Why are you always so cold? Why don't you act like a wife anymore? I wanted to scream, because I've been surviving in your mother's house like a tenant you both resent.
He wouldn't leave with me.
I asked twice. I found a tiny one-bedroom we could barely afford, but it was better than this prison. He said, "She needs help. We can't abandon her." "She abandoned me every day," I said. Then one night, I came home from work and found my clothes dumped in a trash bag on the porch. Diane claimed she needed to disinfect the closet after I used it. Mark stood behind her and didn't say a word. I slept in my car that night. That was the line. The next morning, I went to HR at the hospital, asked about housing assistance, told them I was in a hostile home environment. They connected me with a women's shelter program, not for abuse exactly, but for displaced spouses. I got a temporary studio apartment in Arlington within 3 weeks. I left without a word. No note, no fight, just silence. And still, she wasn't done. She started calling my job, claiming I stole medication from her cabinet. It didn't stick, they knew me too well, but the fact that she even tried, that almost cost me my job. That's when I decided, I'm not done either. About 2 months after I left, I got served. It was a restraining order. Diane claimed I'd threatened her, that I'd tampered with the stairs before her fall, said I loosened a board or spilled water intentionally. I couldn't believe it, but there it was in black and white. She filed the claim through a friend of hers at the courthouse who apparently owed her favors. She used the fall as her weapon. I had to show up in court with a legal aid attorney. The judge saw through it pretty fast. There was no evidence. The order wasn't granted, but just having to defend myself like that made me sick. She wanted me marked. She wanted me dangerous on paper. Mark didn't even show up. That told me everything. But then something changed. I got a call from Diane's neighbor, Mrs. Renshaw. She and I had always gotten along. Older woman, kept to herself. She said, "I'm sorry, but I think you need to know what's really going on in that house." Turns out Diane had fallen before, twice. But she never told anyone, just quietly bandaged herself up. Her legs were getting weak, and her eyesight was going. But she refused help because she didn't want anyone thinking she was getting old and useless. The day she fell down the stairs, the wood was wet, not from sabotage, but because she'd sprayed it down herself to freshen up the back steps. Then slipped. She made up the lie about me because she didn't want to look like a fool. Mrs. Renshaw said she overheard Diane bragging about how she put me in my place. That's when I realized something. Diane wasn't just cruel. She was manipulative and calculating. She wasn't losing control. She was holding onto it like a weapon. So I got strategic. I knew things. About her finances. About the rental properties she managed under the table with her cousin. I knew she didn't claim that income. I knew she paid some tenants in cash to do maintenance and never filed W-2s. I knew about the cash envelope she kept taped under the kitchen sink labeled emergency, which had way more than any normal emergency fund. So I made an anonymous call to the IRS and another to the city housing office. It didn't take long before she was flagged for review. Within a month, she was audited. And within 2, one of her rental units was cited for safety violations, no railing, poor plumbing, and mold. I didn't smile. I didn't dance. I just watched from a distance as the woman who called me useless, dirty, and not family enough had to sit across from government inspectors and explain why she hadn't filed proper tax forms in 3 years.
Mark?
He reached out, finally. Sent a message. I think Mom's getting sick. She's under a lot of pressure. Maybe you could talk to her. I didn't reply. 6 months after I left that house, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I'd gained weight from eating regularly again. I laughed at work. I started doing little things I hadn't done in years, like leaving a candle burning while I read, or sleeping in on Saturdays without guilt. The quiet in my studio apartment wasn't loneliness. It was peace. But Diane's world? It was cracking. The IRS audit uncovered years of undeclared income from the rentals. Her cousin threw her under the bus, claimed she handled all the paperwork while Diane just collected. The city slapped her with fines. One tenant sued her after getting sick from the mold in the kitchen. Then a neighbor complained about her harassing behavior. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd mistreated. The rental license was pulled. She lost the unit. And then came the hospital bill. Her fall had required surgery, rehab, and multiple follow-ups. She hadn't paid the deductible. Now collectors were calling. Mark finally called me. This time, he didn't ask me to come back. He begged. I don't know what to do, he said. She's falling apart. I can't work and take care of her. She's just angry all the time.
Now you know how I felt, I said. I didn't yell.
I didn't cry. I just told him the truth. She broke me. And you let her. There was silence on the line. Then, she says you're the reason everything's going wrong. I laughed once.
No.
I was just the one who finally stopped covering for her. A week later, I was subpoenaed again. This time, it was for a civil case. Diane was being sued by one of her former tenants. They asked if I'd testify about her rental practices. I said yes. I sat in court across from her. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just dimmer. Like the fire she used to aim at me had burned her from the inside. She wouldn't look at me. I told the truth on the stand. Calm, steady, clear. I described the cash envelopes, the tenant payments, her refusing repairs. The time she made me scrub a bathtub with bleach while a leak dripped on my head and she said, "That's what happens when you're not the owner." The jury awarded damages to the tenant. Her face crumpled when the verdict was read. That night, I slept better than I had in years. I've since moved into a better apartment. Got a promotion at work. I started seeing someone who listens when I speak, who doesn't dismiss my pain as too sensitive. As for Mark, last I heard, he moved into a one-bedroom rental closer to his job. Diane now lives in a senior apartment complex. She had to sell her house to cover her fines and legal fees. Sometimes people ask if I regret not helping her that day on the stairs. I don't. Because I did help her. I helped her see what it feels like when someone who's supposed to care walks away. She taught me how to do that. And I learned it well.